Hello and welcome to the program. I am Daniel Makokera coming to you from Kigali, Rwanda. This as we follow the official launch of the EADB operations in Rwanda. This is the roundtable discussion, which is titled Developing of Regional Infrastructure, Opportunities and Challenges. And now the issue here is how do we go forward? The African Union has said that we need to build on the regional economic blocks in order to unite the continent. And I think the East African community and I suppose the EADB supporting this region financially, that is getting underway. Now, joining me to talk about the issues on how to move this region forward, panelists from this region. And I'm joined with by the chairperson of the EADB Governing Council, the Honorable Madam Siad Mbumba, who is an MP and Minister of Finance and Economic Planning from Uganda. Minister, welcome to the program. And I'm also joined by the Honorable Mr. John Rwangomba, who is the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning in Rwanda. Minister, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. And Mr. Joseph Kinyua, who is the Permanent Secretary and Secretary of the Treasury Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning of the Republic of Kenya. Sir, welcome to the program also. Mr. James Mulwana, who is a former chair of the East African Business Council and a prominent business person himself in Uganda. Sir, welcome to the program. And Mr. Faustin Mbundu, the current chair of the East African Business Council and prominent business person also in Rwanda. Say welcome to the program. And we're also joined by Mr. Bagav Prahiti, who is the Coordinator Development Institutions at the African Development Bank. Sir, welcome. It will be interesting to get to hear how the relations are with you and the EADB. Mr. Alois Mutabingwa, who is the Deputy Secretary General at the East African Community responsible for infrastructure and planning. Sir, welcome to the program. And the lady at the helm of the East African Development Bank, Madam Vivian Apopo, who is the Director General there. Ma'am, welcome to the program. Maybe what we should do is start with you, Mr. Mbundu, and say the office is now coming here in your hometown, and I suppose that's good news for you.
The coming in of EADB opening a branch here is actually partly going to arrest that situation. And we are saying, speaking from the private sector perspective, that as an entrepreneur, we have challenges. We have challenges to the point that sometimes we say, give us power, then tell us about the cost later. That's how bad the situation sometimes is. And we are saying that as we go along, if we can recognize that because of historical reasons, the underfunding that has characterized infrastructure budgets for the last 30 or 40 years, when you compare with Southeast Asia, where we used to contribute similar amounts in the budget in percentage terms, then East Africa lagged behind, and that led to the situation that we're in today. But the good news is that a lot of contributions are being made to that sector, and that most of it is actually from domestic sources. So that even with the recent world economic downturn, whereby we actually experienced budget constraints and other related issues, we actually feel that we are now beginning to own the process, to take the problem on our own and try to solve it. And if that can be done, we'll be closing the funding gap. And if that is done in conjunction with closing the gap of inefficiency, whereby we can be more efficient in even utilizing what we have. If we can do better road maintenance, if we can close down losses in transmission of power, if we can actually improve on the protection of the whole ecosystem, and actually continue the efforts of environmental protection, I think we shall go a long way ahead. But before I turn back to you, our presenter, let me say that even the private sector on its own is very willing to join hands with government to actually solve the problem by contributing and accepting to pay more in the short term, trying to solve the problem so that you can enjoy better in the longer term. And we are saying if we can invest more and our private sector takes part in IT technologies, for example, to improve interconnectivity at the ports, we can improve the speed. If we can contribute more to the northern and southern and central corridors in what we contribute by year, whatever mechanism they use, then we are going to contribute to this basket to actually close the funding gap. And if I can say that the opportunities that will come in that are enormous, we shall experience growth, which it is said that if we can actually copy the model of Mauritius and spend as much as they do vis-a-vis their budget, we can actually improve our growth by over 2 percentage points. And then the private sector, cost of doing business, integration can be fully realized and become meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suppose maybe I want to ask the minister from Uganda and say, you heard what the private sector is saying, organized business from Rwanda. Is this the situation, and I'm asking you wearing your two hats as finance minister in Uganda, whether business in Uganda is also clamoring for power like Mr. Mbundu is saying here, and at the same time as the chair of the current chair of the Governing Council, do you think the points he has made, do you buy them?
Thank you very much, moderator, and I would like to thank the chairperson of the Business Council for the statement he has made. I cannot say more, but to endorse what he has said. Cost of doing business in our region is quite high, and therefore makes our region uncompetitive. Because if you consider the cost of power in my country, which is almost 50 cents per kilowatt hour, it's one of the highest in the world. So you cannot expect a business person producing in Uganda to be competitive regionally. Infrastructure is a big challenge. In the National Development Plan of my country, it has been identified as the major binding constraint to growth. But at the same time, for us in Uganda, we think that there is hope to turn this challenge into opportunity, because it has never been a better opportunity moment than now to focus on regional infrastructure after our economies have been integrated. And why am I saying that? If we had developed the infrastructure, say 5-10 years ago, we would not be able to standardize. Each one of us would be developing their own specifications, and this would be difficult to harmonize at a later date. For instance, if I talk about power, each of the countries has got its own specifications. So if you wanted to do a power pool in case of countries with surpluses, which would want to export to countries with deficit, it would be very, very difficult. So that challenge, which we are addressing now, can be turned into an opportunity. Even on the side of regulation, each one of us has got our own regulatory authorities and with its own regulatory rules, which will not be applied regionally. So really, with this regional integration, those can be addressed. Even raising funding, and I'm happy that we have managed to send a message out loud and clear globally, that what the region, what Africa needs now is not investment in the social sector, but investment in infrastructure. So investing jointly in the infrastructure reduces the risks, which are normally feared by investors in this part of the world. So really, to me, there is the challenge. It's a big challenge, but together we create a lot of opportunities for solving this challenge.
Minister Rwangomba, and do you concur? And you also heard Mr. Mbundu is speaking as a chair of the Business Council, but also business person from Rwanda. You concur?
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. And I do concur with my sister, Minister Bumba, that it's really important to focus on development of infrastructure, but looking at it in the regional level. So let me also say, I was very happy to hear Mr. Mbundu saying that the private sector is ready to invest in infrastructure. It's a challenge to their development. It's also very good, and that's what we're trying to do from our side here to encourage the private sector investment in the private sector. For example, in Rwanda, we allocate about 23% of our budget to infrastructure. But that is just like a peanut compared to our demand in terms of infrastructure development. And even if we are to do it really like 100% in Rwanda, if it's not developed in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, still we won't gain, because as a landlocked country, we need to pass through these countries to the sea. So looking at it in the regional context makes a lot of sense, especially to us as landlocked countries. And one, when you look at today, the cost of goods imported in Rwanda, 40% of that cost is just transport. So if we can work together as a region to try to solve these issues, at the end of the day, we are gaining in terms of easing the cost of importing and exporting from our country. And the other thing that I'm happy to note is that our partners in terms of financing, talk of the ADB, talk of the World Bank, and the other partners, as my colleague has just said, have realized this importance of investing in infrastructure, but going beyond that, investing in infrastructure as a regional, in the regional context, because ADB representative will say it better, but what I know is that they plan to increase the allocation on regional level in terms of the funds under the ADF, the same message we got from the World Bank, even the other partners like the US. We had a meeting with them last month when we were attending the annual general meetings of our World Bank ADB as East African Ministers of Finance, talking to them for solutions, to get solutions to solve our problems. So we are working as a region, and that makes more sense, one, in terms of the economies of scale, in terms of being able to come up with really viable projects that you can easily work together to mobilize financing. But also you can't talk of really solving problem in one country without solving it in the other, because at the end of the day, the goods are flowing from one country to another, and if we are talking of regional integration, trading across the borders between ourselves, we need to have that really resolved. So I think it's very important. We are looking at investment in energy. We have big potential for energy in our lake here. And we expect to be supplying energy to the region. Our neighbors in Uganda are doing a big investment in the Bujagali Dam. Maybe if it comes first, can serve the region as we all develop different sources of energy that could. So as we are doing this, we should be looking at the region, not really at the country individually, and that makes a lot of sense in terms of the economies of scale, but also the economics of different investments we are looking at.
So the focus then really is on the region. Enter Mr. Mutabingwa, then you are at the EAC, and do you have programs that are really tailor-made in making sure that the region is almost seamless and integrated?
Yes, but before I answer your question, let me say this region is suffering in terms of business efficiency and effectiveness from mainly three factors, three setbacks. One is already mentioned, it's the infrastructure, poor infrastructure. The second is the non-tariff barriers, partly attributable to the poor infrastructure. And the third is the access to finance, both in terms of business itself, as well as in terms of our public sector financial capability to be able to develop sound infrastructure. We have plans. A political commitment is undoubtedly there, and that is what translates into plans. We have got a master plan for railways networking for East Africa. We have got, now on the energy, it's even something I should also mention with some few details. We have an energy master plan. We have got the ICT broadband infrastructure networking program planning. We have got also a work we are doing to have a 10 years transport and roads development strategy. We are also studying on the possibility of a PPP, public-private sector partnership, the policy and the legal framework that should anchor the resource mobilization from the private sector. Now, that is what I can say here. But it's one thing to plan, and quite another thing to realize results on the ground. Rolling out these plans require the institutional capacity. That is also something we are challenged with as a region. But most importantly, is to reach that level where the ministers you are seeing here can move together as one team, get where there is funding, and put that funding where it is well prepared as a vehicle to deliver the results on the ground. That is, to me, the level, the milestone that we must see in the next 5 to 10 years. Otherwise, we shall sit back here and discuss about poor infrastructure and the challenges related to business.
The Minister, Mr. Mrwana, mentioned earlier that it's very costly. Electricity in your country is costly, but I'm told you're quite a prominent businessman. How have you survived?
Definitely that is true. As you may be aware, that Uganda took it for granted because we had the cheapest power in Uganda because it was generated by hydro. And we didn't plan, very well to realize that as we are growing, the country was growing, and we didn't really focus very much. But I'm grateful that now the...
Poor planning.
Well, originally it was poor planning.
And later?
Because there were no partnership between private sector and public sector. Everything was done by public sector then, until in Uganda. And looking back, I think I should take you back where we came from. Before 1977, if we didn't stop, we wouldn't be suffering what we are suffering today, because it was a well-organized community. And infrastructure was built on that basis. So we have now to go back to the roots. Where did we start and where did we make mistakes? But at that time, we had even reached a stage of attracting direct foreign investment because the East Africa countries could not generate resources to carry out investment. But the population was growing and the planning was not growing, and we left what we started. That's why in East African Business Council, when we started that organization, we wanted to harmonize our lobbying to government, our attraction to foreign direct investment, to come and realize the potential available in this region, which has not been exploited. In business, time never late. The time is right now, because we never realized that there was oil in Uganda. And there are quite a number of attractions. So as long as we work in partnership, there is a great opportunity for the future. Thank you.
In Kenya, the situation, I suppose I can put you on the spot and say you've heard some of the comments that have been made on allocation of budget by business, on whether it is equitable as far as infrastructure is concerned. Would you say how is the situation in Kenya? I suppose that's the question.
Thank you very much, Daniel. First, let me concur in terms of the importance of infrastructure. Evidence globally does indicate those countries that have been able to lift from poverty situation is through improvement of infrastructure. It is the infrastructure that is behind improved efficiency and productivity. So I do quite agree. And this goes to the question that you posed to me directly in terms of we as a country, Kenya. If you look at our development strategies that we have put in place since year 2003, one of the key areas we recognized was infrastructure, because for almost 20 years, the government was hardly putting any money, both for development of new infrastructure or even the maintenance, and therefore there was a deterioration of the infrastructure all over the country. We have moved in a big way now to put a lot of money, almost getting to 30% of our total budget. And our commitment is to ensure we continue to increase, because we realize where the government can make a major impact and help the private sector is to ensure we have a functional infrastructure, in particular roads and energy, as has been mentioned. But if I link it with the dimension of a region, our region has the potential. If you take energy, we have the potential to tap on the resources, the water resources, in the case of Uganda, Rwanda. In Kenya, we have a geothermal potential with potential of large magnitude. We are told if we take the geothermal, about 7,000 megawatts, between 7 and 10, that we can tap into. And at the moment, we have already done about 200 megawatt, which means there's a lot of potential. What is important is to even think as to how, as a region, can we invest in some of those areas in a regional context where we should not invest as one country, but team up together. That way, we'll be able to mobilize the resources and perhaps in a more efficient way, ensure we have the infrastructure that is required. This is important, it is urgent. If we are going to escape the poverty and join countries like Singapore, there is no way we can avoid it by developing our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think then we come to you, Madam Apopo, and ask the question. On your desk, do you see bankable projects passing through? Because the core here is we need financing, and you are in the region. Now you've spread out in all the member countries, you have offices there. Is it an issue of bankable projects lacking, or is it an issue of lack of funding, or this is how you are tailor-making most of your projects in the call that has come out here from business and from ministers also?
Oh, thank you, Dana, for that question. I think we see a challenge on both sides. One, the needs are immense, and they've been identified in all the sectors, in ICT, in road transport, in rail transport, in water. But the challenge that we have is to structure those products and projects in a way that they're bankable and that they'll be attractive for financing, either from the private sector or from the public sector or both. When you come to discuss regional projects, these are large projects with a high capital expenditure. And the gestation period is also typically very long. If you look at, say, a project to develop a rail link between the member states, the feasibility study and the planning that would go into that sort of project would be a large percentage of GDP, probably about 5% of GDP out of the member states. So the challenge that we have to bring bankable projects to the table is first to find the funding that would prepare these projects so that they are financially, technically, and environmentally feasible. And once they've been packaged in that way, the next challenge then is to go out and seek appropriate funding. Because when you talk about a rail link, it would be possible to finance that through public and private sector funding, but then you'd have to structure that project in a way that certain elements of it would be of interest to the private sector, and those that are not would then be of interest to the public sector.
Let me come in and ask you the question. What is the turnaround time on getting a project and disbursement? Because I think most of the people say that takes a lot of time. I don't know whether it's the issue at the EADB, but I've heard some people complaining at the African Development Bank that also does take a little bit of time. I'll come to you and you have the right to reply, sir. But right now for the EADB.
I think, Daniel, we have to distinguish. If we are talking about regular medium scale or business loans, then that way the time frame would be very short. It would be probably a quarter or less. But when you're talking about a quarter of a year, so 3 months or 4 months. Okay. But what we're discussing here is large regional infrastructure projects. So you're developing a rail link from one country that may traverse the territory of 2 other countries. And in there's immense planning that has to take place. One, to get the structure right. You have to get the legal framework right. You have to get the financing and the costing of that project right. And then you have to go out to tender and get the right contractor to be able to deliver that project on time.